7-year-old girl refuses to sit down, and what her teacher discovers next sends her rushing to call 911 in terror. As sunlight streamed gently through the windows of room 102, Ms. Margaret Collins moved among the small desks of her first-grade classroom, watching her students ease into the start of another school day. With 2 decades of teaching behind her, she had developed a quiet intuition for children, an ability to read the silent signals hidden behind their words. That's when her gaze fell once again on the new girl, Emma Gyllenhaal. While the other children had settled into their seats, Emma remained standing beside her desk, motionless and quiet. It was only her 3rd day at Maple Hill Elementary, yet not once had she taken a seat. "Emma, sweetheart," Ms. Collins said in a soft, reassuring tone as she approached the delicate girl with chestnut hair falling unevenly around her pale cheeks. "Would you like to take a seat and join us for our morning story?" Emma clutched the edge of her faded blue dress more tightly. "No, thank you, Ms. Collins. I'd rather stand," she replied, barely above a whisper, her eyes never lifting from the floor. Something in the stiffness of her posture unsettled Margaret. The subtle shaking of her shoulders, the uneasy shifting from one foot to the other, as though standing itself caused her pain. "Is there something wrong with your chair?" Ms. Collins asked with a gentle curiosity. "No, ma'am," Emma answered promptly, her voice polite, practiced. As the morning unfolded, Ms. Collins began to notice the patterns, how Emma leaned against the walls during class, recoiled slightly when adults moved nearby, and never uttered a single complaint, even after standing for hours on end. Later that afternoon, as she was preparing the next day's lessons, Margaret heard a faint rustling from the reading corner. She walked over to find Emma sitting behind a low shelf, tightly hugging her backpack to her chest. "Emma, everyone's gone home, sweetheart," she said softly. Emma's eyes widened, startled. "Is it that late? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Ms. Collins said, watching as Emma sprang to her feet. "Is your aunt or uncle coming to get you?" At the mention of her guardians, Emma's face shifted, her expression darkened. "Uncle Bradley doesn't like to wait," she murmured. A cold flicker of concern moved through Margaret. "Is everything all right at home, Emma?" Before she could answer, a car horn blared sharply outside. Emma froze, her shoulders tensing. "I have to go," she said, dashing toward the door. Ms. Collins stood silently, her stomach tightening. Something wasn't right, and she knew she couldn't just look away. The next morning, the staff lounge at Maple Hill Elementary buzzed with the usual small talk and clinking of mugs. Ms. Collins stirred her tea, her thoughts still tangled with worry over Emma Gyllenhaal. Years of experience had taught her that children often revealed their wounds through behavior more than words. "You've got that look again, Ellie," said Diane from the science department, settling into the seat across from her. "Which one's keeping you up this time?" Margaret gave a soft smile. Among her co-workers, she was known for seeing too much, for caring more than most. Some admired her dedication. Others saw it as meddling. "New student. Something doesn't sit right," she said quietly. "There's always something off with someone," Diane replied, not without sympathy. "You can't fix it all." Margaret's hand tightened around her mug. Only a few of her colleagues understood why she always noticed what others didn't, why she followed her instincts even when it meant crossing lines. A decade ago, there had been a boy in her class named Michael. Always wore long sleeves, always avoided questions. She'd noticed, but hadn't pressed hard enough. By the time help arrived, it had been too late. That tiny sealed casket still haunted her sleep. "Just be careful," Diane said, her voice low, "especially with the Gyllenhaal girl. Bradley Gyllenhaal's brother is on the school board." Margaret nodded, gathering her papers. In a town like Maple Hill, where just over 8,000 people lived, connections ran deep, and silence could be dangerous. The Gyllenhaals belonged to old money and carried an old name, the kind that echoed through city street signs. As Margaret moved through her morning routine, arranging worksheets, checking the weather board, updating birthdays, she reviewed in her mind the few things she knew about Emma. The girl had come to live with her aunt and uncle after losing both parents in a car crash 6 months earlier. The transfer document, it's noted that she'd attended grief counseling, which might account for some emotional distance, but not for her refusal to sit. When the children began filing into the classroom, Margaret stood by the door, greeting each one by name. Her gaze landed on Emma at once. The last to enter, shoulders curled inward, wearing the same dress as the day before despite the chilly morning. Once the day began, Margaret opened the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out a small notebook labeled Observations. She flipped to a blank page and wrote at the top, Emma Gyllenhaal, with the date and a single note beneath. Still standing, day 4. The steady rhythm of October rain tapped against the windows as Ms. Collins added to her notes. Day 12. No lunch again. Declined school meal. Said she wasn't hungry. Wearing long sleeves even on gym day. Remained standing through math. A knock on the classroom door broke her thoughts. Principal Warren appeared, smiling in his usual easygoing manner. Margaret, the Gyllenhaals are here for the meeting you requested. They're waiting in my office. She hadn't expected them so soon. Normally, she would let pages of notes pile up before calling for a meeting, but something about Emma pushed her to act early. I'll be right there, she said, sliding the notebook back into her desk. In the principal's office, Catherine and Bradley Gyllenhaal sat side by side in matching charcoal suits. Catherine's blonde hair was pulled into a flawless bun, while Bradley's handshake was firm, his gaze steady. They looked nothing like Margaret had imagined. No obvious warning signs, just polished, professional exteriors. Ms. Collins, Catherine said, her voice even. Principal Warren mentioned you had some concerns about Emma. Margaret described what she had observed, Emma's reluctance to sit, her withdrawal, the missed lunches, her persistent exhaustion. She kept her voice even, laying out facts without drawing conclusions. We're grateful for your attention, Bradley responded, his tone smooth and composed. But Emma has endured a great loss. Losing both parents so suddenly was devastating. Catherine dabbed at the corner of her eye with a monogrammed handkerchief. My sister and her husband, it happened so fast. Emma's been deeply affected. She's under Dr. Mitchell's care for grief counseling, Bradley added. He assures us that unusual behavior is to be expected during this adjustment. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. Of course. I know trauma can appear in many forms. I'm just wondering if there's a specific reason she might be avoiding sitting. Could there be some physical discomfort involved? A flicker passed over Bradley's face, so fleeting Margaret almost didn't notice. Emma has always been a bit sensitive, tends to be dramatic. Back at her previous school, she once told her teacher the chairs hurt her bones. Dr. Mitchell believes it's a side effect of her anxiety. Principal Warren leaned forward slightly. The Gyllenhaals have long been pillars of our community, Margaret. Bradley's family has supported this school for generations. The underlying message was unmistakable. Proceed with caution. We're doing everything we can to help Emma adjust, Catherine said, rising from her seat, a clear signal the meeting was over. She may just need more time to settle in. As they exited, Margaret noticed Bradley's hand resting on Catherine's back, guiding her with a gentle but firm touch that left pale creases on her silk blouse. Later that afternoon, while the children were absorbed in their art projects, Margaret knelt beside Emma's desk. The girl was standing, coloring a group of stick figures. That's lovely, Emma. Is that your family? Emma's tiny fingers clenched the crayon. The angels took them. Margaret asked, And your new family? Your aunt and uncle? Her grip tightened even more. They're not angels, she murmured, then began furiously scribbling black over her entire drawing. Inside the gym, Coach Bryant had organized a variation of tag, with children weaving between cones and hoops on the gleaming floor. Everyone joined, except Emma. She stood apart from the others, arms wrapped around herself. Not feeling up to it, Gyllenhaal? Coach Bryant called out, his loud voice making Emma visibly recoil. She's just watching today, Margaret chimed in as she stepped closer. Right, Emma? The little girl gave a silent nod, eyes glued to the ground. When the bell rang to signal the end of gym class, Margaret noticed the dark clouds rolling in. Looks like it's indoor recess today, she told the group. Let's get changed and head back to the classroom. In the girls' changing area, she assisted the youngest students with sweaters and shoelaces. Just as she was about to leave, Margaret noticed Emma hadn't come out of the bathroom stall. "Emma, sweetheart, do you need help?" she asked gently. A soft sniffle responded from behind the door. "My shirt got wet at the water fountain." "That's okay. I've got some extra clothes in my emergency cupboard. But the sentence was cut short as Mia Reynolds burst in. "Ms. Collins, there's a leak in the hallway ceiling." By the time Margaret had handled the minor flood and returned to the bathroom, the other girls had already left. She knocked gently on Emma's stall. "Emma, everyone's gone. I brought you a dry shirt." The lock clicked open. Emma stood in her gym shirt, arms folded tightly, cheeks streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's okay to feel upset," Margaret said, crouching down to her level. "Let me help you." As Emma hesitantly reached for the shirt, Margaret's breath caught. The child's gym shirt had ridden up slightly, revealing a series of deep purplish bruises across her lower back. Their oval shape couldn't be explained by any fall. "Emma," Margaret asked, trying to stay calm, "how did you get those bruises?" The girl stiffened, her body rigid with fear. For a long pause, she said nothing. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "The punishment chair has nails." Margaret felt a chill creep over her. "What punishment chair, Emma?" "At home, for kids who don't listen." Emma's hands clutched her shirt tightly. "Uncle Bradley says it helps us learn how to behave." Margaret forced herself to breathe steadily. Training took over. Observe, document, report. She helped Emma into the clean shirt, her hands careful and slow despite the fury rising inside her. "Emma, I need you to be very brave right now. Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded, fear wide in her eyes. "I'm going to tell some adults about what you shared, not because you're in trouble, but because it's not okay for anyone to treat you like that. Uncle Bradley says no one believes me because I make things up." Her voice trembled. "I believe you," Margaret said, holding Emma's hand firmly. "And I'm going to keep you safe." As they walked back toward the classroom, Margaret pulled out her phone. The rules said to report to the principal first, but something told her this couldn't wait. She dialed 911. 3 hours later, Margaret sat in a rigid plastic chair under the humming lights of Maple Hill Police Department, her notebook clutched in her lap. 3 hours since she'd made the call. 3 hours since uniformed officers showed up at her classroom. 3 hours of questions, paperwork, and rising frustration. "Ms. Collins," Officer Drake said as he slid a cup of vending machine coffee toward her, "I understand you're concerned, but there's a process we have to follow." "I saw the bruises myself," Margaret insisted, flipping through her notes. "And I've recorded every concerning behavior. 12 days worth." Emma mentioned a punishment chair with nails. That's not something a 6-year-old imagines. Officer Drake sighed, pressing his fingers to his temples. She was examined by the school nurse. The bruises seemed to be from several days ago, maybe before her placement with the Gyllenhaals. "That's impossible," Margaret shot back. "She's been living with them for months. And what about her saying there's a chair?" Drake paused, choosing his words cautiously. "Children can sometimes misunderstand discipline. The Gyllenhaals say she's been emotionally fragile since her parents died. They also mentioned she's made up stories at her previous school." Margaret's hand tightened around her pen. "May I see the report from her last school?" Drake sifted through a stack of papers. "It's not in our records yet. We've requested them." A knock interrupted the conversation as a woman in a crisp pantsuit entered. Her ID badge read, "Deborah Langley, Child Protective Services." "Ms. Collins, I'm overseeing Emma's case. I want to assure you we're taking this matter seriously. Our initial home visit didn't uncover anything alarming." "You've already been to their home?" Margaret asked in disbelief. "When was that?" "About an hour ago." "The Gyllenhaals were fully cooperative. They walked us through each room. We found no evidence of any so-called punishment chair." Margaret struggled to keep her voice even. Of course, they wouldn't leave anything out in the open if they knew you were coming. Ms. Winter's expression tightened. We are trained to recognize signs, Ms. Collins. The house was spotless. Emma has her own room, filled with books and toys suitable for her age. There were no signs of neglect or physical harm. What about Emma's statement? Did you talk to her privately? Briefly. She seemed uneasy but didn't repeat her earlier claims. In fact, she denied mentioning anything about nails or a chair. A chill passed through Margaret. She's scared. Children often recant out of fear. Officer Drake shut his notebook. Ms. Collins, making false accusations is no small matter. The Gyllenhaals are highly regarded in this community. Bradley Gyllenhaal's brother is on the school board. Their family's been here for generations. And what does that have to do with whether he's abusing a child? Margaret asked sharply. Ms. Winters stepped in calmly. We'll continue to observe the situation. Emma will stay with her guardians as we carry out a thorough investigation. We've scheduled another visit to their home for next week. As Margaret stepped out of the station, rain soaking through her cardigan, a heavy weight settled in her chest. She had followed every protocol, yet somehow Emma was being sent back to the very place she had pointed to as dangerous. On impulse, Margaret drove to the county records office. If Emma's old school had raised any red flags, there should be a record. A kind-eyed older woman at the counter helped her search the database. That's strange, the clerk murmured, frowning at her screen. There was a file, but it's sealed. Access is restricted. Margaret's unease grew. Who has the power to seal a child's welfare file? A judge, the clerk replied, or someone with significant influence. Back at Maple Hill Elementary, Ms. Collins's first-grade classroom buzzed with energy as students finished their fall projects. Each had decorated a paper leaf with things they were thankful for, preparing to share with parents at an upcoming event. Margaret scanned the room. Her eyes stopped on Emma, who stood quietly at her desk, coloring her leaf with careful strokes. Since Margaret's report 2 weeks earlier, Emma had become more withdrawn. The investigation had stalled. Follow-up visits kept getting delayed. Okay, everyone, Margaret called out, gently clapping her hands. Let's meet on the reading carpet. It's time to share our gratitude leaves. Children eagerly rushed to the colorful rug, sitting cross-legged. Emma hesitated, then made her way to her usual spot on the edge, standing alone. One by one, the children shared their leaves. Typical answers filled the air. My dog, pizza, my tablet. When Emma's turn arrived, Margaret noticed her pallor. Emma, would you like to share yours with us? The girl nodded and stepped forward unsteadily. I'm thankful for... Her voice trembled. She swayed. Margaret stepped toward her. Emma, are you feeling all right? Before Emma could respond, her knees gave way. Margaret caught her just in time, preventing her from falling. The class gasped in shock. Ms. Peters, Margaret called to her assistant. Please take the children to the library. Tell Mrs. Simmons it's urgent. As the children were led out, Margaret held Emma gently. The girl's skin felt clammy. Her breath was shallow. I'll call the nurse, Ms. Peters said, picking up the phone. When Nurse Gladwell arrived, she quickly checked Emma's vitals. As she lifted the back of the child's sweater, both women froze. Fading bruises overlapped newer ones, alongside small, round burn marks. My lord, Nurse Gladwell whispered. These aren't from an accident. Emma's eyes fluttered open. Seeing the women examining her back, her face filled with panic. Don't tell, she begged faintly. He'll use the hot spoon if you tell. Margaret felt her heart break into pieces. Call an ambulance, she told the nurse. Right now. At Maple Hill Memorial Hospital, Margaret paced back and forth in the waiting area while doctors examined Emma. Principal Warren showed up, the usual calm on his face replaced with genuine concern. The Gyllenhaals are on their way, he informed her. What exactly happened? He asked. But before Margaret could speak, Dr. Patel came out of the examination room, her expression serious. Ms. Collins, may I speak with you? In a quiet corner, the doctor leaned in and spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. The child is severely undernourished. with numerous injuries in varying stages of healing. Some resemble cigarette burns, others look like they were caused by blunt force. There's clear evidence of ongoing abuse. Margaret felt a rush of conflicting emotions, justified, yet overwhelmed. I reported this 2 weeks ago. No one listened. Dr. Patel gave a grave nod. I've already alerted the authorities. This time there will be an official inquiry. These injuries can't be brushed aside. Suddenly, loud voices at the entrance grabbed their attention. Bradley and Catherine Gyllenhaal had arrived, joined by a sharply dressed man. "She's our niece," Bradley declared to the receptionist. "We want to see her immediately." Margaret stood still as Dr. Patel stepped in front of them. Though petite, she held her ground firmly. "Emma is currently under hospital protection. An investigation is underway." The suited man stepped forward. "I'm Richard Gyllenhaal, attorney and member of the school board. There's been a misunderstanding. My brother is her legal guardian, and I have medical records that prove she's been abused before." Dr. Patel didn't budge. "No one will be allowed to see her without a court order or clearance from the police." As hospital security arrived to defuse the confrontation, Margaret quietly made her way to Emma's room. The girl lay motionless under white sheets, an IV taped to her fragile arm. "I'm here," Margaret whispered, gently holding her hand. "You're safe now. I promise." The door creaked open as Principal Warren walked in, his face tense. "Margaret, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes. You should prepare yourself." "Prepare for what?" she asked, adjusting her cardigan. "Richard Gyllenhaal is calling for disciplinary action against you. He claims your accusations were reckless and have harmed his family's reputation. Some board members appear to agree." A chill crept into Margaret's chest. "And Emma? What's happening with her?" Warren hesitated. "CPS finished their home visit yesterday. They're recommending that Emma be returned to the Gyllenhaals." Margaret gasped. "That can't be. Not after what the doctors found." "The system runs the way it does," Warren said quietly, "especially in a small town like ours." The school board meeting went just as Warren had warned. Richard Gyllenhaal, dressed in a tailored suit, painted his brother and sister-in-law as loving caregivers dealing with a troubled child. Board members nodded in agreement, while Margaret's findings were minimized and portrayed as overzealous. "While Ms. Collins' dedication to her students is commendable," Superintendent Grayson concluded, "in this situation, her actions have caused undue distress to a family already facing difficulties. We recommend a formal reprimand and reassign Emma Gyllenhaal to Ms. Wilson's class for the rest of the academic year." Margaret sat frozen as the motion passed by a vote of 6-1. Only Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired social worker, opposed it. The next morning, Emma returned to school. Margaret saw her briefly in the hallway. She looked thinner, paler, avoiding eye contact as Catherine Gyllenhaal whispered to Ms. Wilson. For a split second, Emma's eyes met Margaret's, then quickly turned away, the fear in her expression unmistakable. As the day went on, Margaret noticed subtle but undeniable shifts in her colleagues. Conversations died when she entered the staff room. Her classroom supply requests went missing. Parents who once greeted her warmly now looked the other way. "They're shutting you out," Nurse Gladwell whispered over lunch. "Same thing happened to me with the Parsons case last year. Nothing came of it. I almost lost my job." "How can an entire town ignore this?" Margaret asked, pushing away her uneaten sandwich. "Money. Influence. The Gyllenhaals have both," Gladwell replied, leaning in. "But there's something else you should know." I looked into Emma's medical files from her old school. There were 3 earlier reports of injuries, each one marked resolved by the same CPS worker who's handling her case now. "The whole system's compromised," Gladwell had confirmed. "County records, CPS, even some in the police. The Gyllenhaals have surrounded themselves with a fortress." That afternoon, Margaret had tried approaching Ms. Wilson to ask about Emma. The response was cold. "It's been handled. Further involvement is not your concern." No explanation. No room for discussion. Back at her desk, Margaret was packing up when she found a folded note tucked deep in a drawer. It was a child's drawing. A house, shaded dark at the bottom where it said, basement. Tiny stick figures were trapped underneath. In the corner, shaky letters pleaded, "Help them too!" Her heart stopped. Emma wasn't the only one. That night, sleep wasn't coming. All that remained was the gnawing urgency to act to save Emma, and maybe others. A sudden knock startled her. It was rare for anyone to visit this late in her quiet building. "Who is it?" she called out, inching toward the door. "Detective Marcus Wallace, Maple Hill PD," came the voice. "I need a word about Emma Gyllenhaal." When she opened the door, a tall man stood there, disheveled, weary-eyed, holding up his badge. His tone was serious, but not threatening. "May I come in?" Margaret hesitated, then stepped aside. His eyes went straight to the papers on her table. "Looks like you've been building your own case," he said, picking up one of the photographs. "Not that it's gotten me anywhere," Margaret replied cautiously. "You here to shut me up too?" Wallace shook his head. "No. I read your report 2 weeks ago. Started digging on my own time. The way it was dismissed, it didn't sit right." He placed his badge down gently. Then I understood why. "The Gyllenhaals," Margaret said quietly. "Connections. Influence. There's more," he said. "A pattern. Kids placed with them, signs of abuse, then quietly moved when someone asks too many questions. Your report, Emma's, was the first to even reach a hospital." Margaret's voice dropped. "Why tell me this? Why not go through the official route?" Wallace's jaw tightened. "I tried that. 3 years ago, back in Riverdale. My niece was placed with a foster family tied to local politics. She changed, got hurt. I reported it, followed every rule. They said they'd take care of it." His voice faltered. 2 months later, she died. They called it an accident. "I'm so sorry," Margaret said softly. "I left after that, moved here, started over. But your report about Emma, it was the same pattern, the same silence." He pointed to her files. "I need everything. What you've seen, what Emma said." She nodded, a flicker of hope rising. "You believe me?" "I believe what's in front of me," he said. "And I believe a child's in danger." He pulled out a small notebook. "Off the record for now. We'll build a case they can't hide." For the next hour, Margaret recounted everything. Emma's pain, her collapse, the punishment chair, the hot spoon. Wallace took notes, asked precise questions, listened closely. When she showed him the basement drawing, his face darkened. "Licensed foster homes have limits, with inspections," he explained. "If there are unlisted children, it could mean trafficking." "Or underground adoptions," Margaret added, shaken. "Either way, this goes deeper than the Gyllenhaals," he said, carefully photographing the evidence with his phone. "I've got contacts with the state police. One's not tied to the county, but we need proof. Solid proof." "How do we find it when the system's protecting them?" Margaret asked. Wallace's gaze didn't waver. "Sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to work outside it. Are you ready for that?" Margaret saw Emma's tearful face in her mind. "The drawing, the basement. Whatever it takes," she said. As Wallace stood to go, he handed her a burner phone. "Use this to reach me." For the first time in weeks, Margaret felt the faint stirrings of hope. The next week, at the far end of the parking lot behind the municipal building, Detective Wallace's unmarked car sat idling. She slipped into the passenger seat, holding a manila folder tightly against her chest. "Did anyone see you?" Wallace asked, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "I don't think so. I told them I was just dropping off some field trip forms." She opened the folder, spreading out a stack of copied documents. These were hidden in the school's old archives, incident reports on Gyllenhaal foster children, all marked as resolved or dismissed. Wallace flipped through the papers, jaw clenched. 3 kids over 5 years, each showing similar red flags. "And each one transferred or moved not long after," Margaret added. "And look who signed off on closing every case." She pointed to the signature at the bottom of each page. "Judge Thomas Blackwell," Wallace read aloud. "The same judge who denied the protection order for Emma after she was hospitalized. He plays golf with Richard Gyllenhaal every Sunday," Margaret said. "I heard Principal Warren say it in passing." Wallace gave a grim nod. "I've been reviewing financial records. Turns out the Gyllenhaals have donated large sums to several re-election campaigns." "Judge Blackwell's included?" Margaret asked. Yes, and there's more. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his tablet. Foster care payments. They've received state funds for 7 children in the last 10 years, but only 3 are registered in local schools. The rest, Margaret whispered, could be the ones in the basement. Wallace nodded. Exactly. Look here. He swiped to another file. 3 years ago, their house underwent major renovations. The plans included a private living area in the basement. Was it inspected properly? Margaret asked, already suspecting the answer. No official permits were filed, but it passed anyway. Who signed off? Walter Gyllenhaal, Bradley's cousin. Margaret stared at the fluttering flag outside the municipal building, a symbol of justice that now felt like a lie. We have to see what's in that basement, Wallace finally said. But Blackwell's blocked every attempt to get a warrant. What about surveillance? Margaret suggested. If we track who shows up on Friday nights? Wallace took the badge, realization dawning. You're suggesting... Friday is in 3 days, Margaret said, steadier than she felt. If there are kids down there, we can't wait. Wallace studied her. This goes beyond anything professional, Ms. Collins. It's dangerous. She pictured Emma's frightened drawings, those silent cries for help. Some risks are worth taking. Wallace tucked the badge into his coat. Tomorrow night we start surveillance. We'll assess from there. He started the engine. Act normal until then. Any change could tip them off. As Margaret climbed out, he said softly, You're brave, Ms. Collins. She shook her head. I'm just a teacher who can't look away. The art therapy room at Maple Hill Elementary had always been her refuge, a quiet space where children could speak without words. Though her role was only part-time and she'd recently faced a formal warning, she still had permission to work with students during their breaks. After some difficult back and forth with Ms. Wilson, Margaret had finally arranged a session with Emma under the guise of helping her transition. 45 minutes. That was the rule, and the reminder came with a sharp tone. No personal matters allowed. As the door clicked shut behind Ms. Wilson, Margaret took a quiet breath, her eyes settling on Emma, who stood tensely by the table, avoiding eye contact. It's so good to see you, Margaret said softly. I've missed you in class. Emma glanced up quickly. Am I the reason you're in trouble? She whispered. Margaret felt a pang in her chest. Of course not, sweetheart. Sometimes adults disagree about things, but it's never because of you. She motioned toward the art supplies. Want to draw something today? Anything you feel like. Emma hesitated, then picked out a blank sheet of paper and a handful of colored pencils, still standing as she began sketching. Margaret chose not to urge her to sit. Trust takes time. You like to stand when you draw, don't you? She said lightly. Emma paused mid-stroke. Sitting is for good kids, she muttered. I'm not good yet. Margaret swallowed hard, hiding her reaction. Who says when you're good enough? Uncle Bradley. And the Friday people. Margaret's breath caught. Friday people? She asked gently. Who are they? Emma's hand trembled slightly. People with cameras sometimes. Important people. I don't like Fridays. Shifting the topic, Margaret pointed to Emma's drawing, what looked like a large house with multiple rooms. Tell me about your picture. It's our house, Emma answered. Upstairs is for good kids who know how to behave when the visitors come. Downstairs is for kids who still need to learn. How many kids live with you? Margaret asked. The pencil stilled. I'm not supposed to say. It's a secret. Margaret leaned in just a little. Some secrets can hurt you, and when that happens, it's okay to share them so everyone can be safe. Emma thought for a moment, then began adding small stick figures to the rooms. 2 labeled my room, 3 in another, 4 smaller ones in what appeared to be the basement. 90 children? Margaret asked, trying to sound calm. Sometimes more. Sometimes they go away. Emma picked up a black pencil and darkened the basement. The quiet ones get to go upstairs. The noisy ones stay down longer. Margaret's thoughts spun, but she kept her expression steady. What happens when the visitors show up? Emma's face darkened. They take pictures, videos. If we don't smile right, there's the chair. She suddenly looked up, panic in her eyes. I talked. Now I'll have to sit on the nails again. No, Emma, Margaret said firmly, moving closer. That won't happen, I promise. You're very brave for telling me. Emma leaned gently against Margaret's side, a small but powerful gesture. There's a new girl downstairs, she whispered. She cries a lot. Uncle Bradley says if she doesn't learn to be quiet, she'll never see the sun again. Margaret felt sick but kept her arm around Emma. When did she get there? 2 nights ago. A big car brought her, dark windows. Emma drew another tiny figure in the basement. She keeps asking for her mom. I told her moms don't find you once you're in the dark place. Margaret's eyes stung. Can I keep this drawing to remember our time together? Emma nodded, then froze at the sound of footsteps. She quickly stepped back and resumed her stiff stance. The door opened. Time's up, Ms. Wilson called. Emma turned one last time. Her eyes met Margaret's with a silent, desperate plea. After they left, Margaret carefully slipped the drawing into a folder and texted Wallace using the burner phone. 9 kids confirmed. New girl arrived 2 days ago. Strong signs of trafficking. We need to act now. His reply came almost instantly. Tonight, 11 p.m. Be ready. In Wallace's small apartment, the living room had become an impromptu operations center. Harsh fluorescent lights highlighted the tension on Margaret's face as she paced, while red strings stretched across the wall, connecting names, photos, and pins, all tracing back to the Gyllenhaals and their ties to officials in Maple Hill. 9 children, Wallace said under his breath, running a hand through his hair. How can they keep 9 kids hidden? The homeschooling laws here are full of holes, Margaret replied. All the Gyllenhaals have to do is submit 1 form a year saying they teach at home. No one checks. Wallace nodded grimly. They only let foster inspectors see what they want them to see. A few clean rooms upstairs, enough for appearances. Meanwhile, they collect state money for all the kids and keep the others locked away. His voice faltered. In the basement. The newest girl worries me the most, Margaret said. She's proof this isn't just neglect. They're bringing kids in. This is organized trafficking. Wallace checked the time. 8:17 p.m. He looked directly at her. We've got a choice. If we go through the system, get a warrant based on Emma's info and our surveillance, it could take days. With Judge Blackwell involved, the plan might never unfold. And if we don't go through the system? Margaret asked, though she already knew the answer. We go in tonight, unofficially. If Emma's account is accurate and there really are children being held against their will, then it becomes a crisis. That would justify immediate intervention. Wallace hesitated. But if we're wrong, or we can't gather solid proof fast, our careers are finished. I could be charged with breaking and entering. Margaret lifted Emma's drawing, eyes fixed on the tiny figures locked in a basement. This isn't just about careers anymore. These are children's lives. She met his gaze, her voice steady. I don't think we have a choice. Wallace gave a short nod, grabbing his tactical bag. I've got a connection in state police. Lieutenant Ramirez. If we uncover anything, I'll call her. She can bring in a neutral team, separate from the local departments. Just as he laid out the details, Margaret's phone rang. She glanced down. Principal Warren. She exchanged a tense glance with Wallace before answering. Margaret, there's an emergency board meeting at 7 a.m. tomorrow, Warren said. His voice was unusually tight. You're expected to attend. What's this about? She asked, motioning for Wallace to listen. Richard Gyllenhaal has filed official complaints, harassment, and defamation. He's demanding your termination, effective immediately. Warren lowered his tone. There's more. A restraining order has been issued. You're barred from contacting Emma or coming within 500 feet of the Gyllenhaal's home. Judge Blackwell approved it this afternoon. A wave of cold panic swept over her. How did they find out I was still seeing Emma? Someone reported your therapy session. I'm sorry, Margaret, this isn't good. When the call ended, she turned to Wallace. They're speeding things up. So we have to do the same. We go tonight, right after sunset. That restraining order complicates things, Margaret warned. Legally, yes, but morally? Wallace shook his head. I've looked the other way once before while the system shielded abusers, but not this time. As night settled in, they prepared in tense silence. Wallace checked his sidearm, then packed a flashlight, a compact camera, and lock-picking tools, leftovers from his tactical days. Margaret's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The message read, "County Records Office fire. Foster files gone. Not an accident." Wallace read it over her shoulder. "They're erasing everything," he muttered. "We're running out of time." The Gyllenhaal house sat at the end of a secluded road, flanked by tall oaks that offered natural concealment. "Fridays, they have visitors," Margaret whispered once they parked a quarter-mile away. As they walked, Margaret's heart pounded. Every sound seemed louder, every shadow longer. But beneath her fear, something fierce was building. She remembered Emma standing for hours, denied the right to sit. She pictured the girl in the basement, sobbing for her mother. At the property's edge, Wallace scanned the setup through binoculars. 2 cameras by the front door, motion sensors along the walkway, but the side entrance, near the garage, looks less secure. "That's where they bring groceries," Margaret said softly, recalling Emma's drawing. She pointed to the spot marked with an X. Wallace nodded. "You've got a detective's eye, Ms. Collins." "I'd rather be in a classroom," she replied. As they crept toward the side door, ducking beneath windows, Margaret whispered a vow to the children inside. "Hold on, we're coming!" The service door gave way with a faint click under Wallace's skilled hand. Margaret held her breath as they slipped into a mudroom just off a spotless kitchen. The clean granite countertops clashed starkly with what they feared lay hidden below. "Remember," Wallace said in a hushed voice, "document everything. Don't touch anything unless we have to." They moved cautiously through the ground floor, Wallace leading. Every creak in the floorboards heightened their awareness. The living room was immaculate, almost too perfect. Designer furniture, precisely placed. Framed family photos of Bradley and Catherine Gyllenhaal posing with different children, all smiling, all empty-eyed. "Look," Margaret whispered, pointing to a plaque. "Citizen of the Year, Bradley Gyllenhaal, recognized by Mayor Collins for extraordinary service to child welfare." The words turned her stomach. Wallace took a silent photo before pressing on. At the end of a long corridor, they encountered a solid door with both a deadbolt and a keypad. "Basement access," Wallace murmured, studying the high-level security. "This isn't your average child lock." While he worked on the mechanism, Margaret noticed a nearby recess with a surveillance setup, 6 small monitors showing various areas of the house. One screen displayed what looked like a bedroom where 2 small bodies lay still in separate beds. "Kids upstairs," she whispered, gesturing. Wallace gave a grim nod as the lock clicked open. The door revealed a staircase descending into shadow. A chill hit them, thick with the smell of fear, sweat, urine, despair. Margaret knew she'd never forget it. Wallace turned on his flashlight and kept the beam low as they went down. At the bottom stood another door, this one steel-reinforced with a sliding peephole. His jaw clenched as he tackled the second lock, working faster now. When it gave way, Margaret gasped. The basement had been divided into bare rooms, each with a mattress on the floor. Under a flickering bulb, small figures huddled under thin covers. In one corner, a girl around 7 rocked back and forth, arms around her knees. "Police," Wallace said softly, flashing his badge. "We're here to help." No one moved. Their eyes followed the adults with a fear shaped by betrayal. Margaret stepped closer, lowering herself to the ground. "My name's Ms. Collins. I'm a teacher," she said gently. "We're taking you somewhere safe." The rocking girl spoke in a whisper. "Are you real help or fake help?" The others said that too. The question shattered Margaret. "Real help," she promised. "I know, Emma. She told me about you. At Emma's name, something changed. A cautious shift of energy among them. A younger child crept from beneath a blanket, his face hollow, hair matted. "The new girl's really sick," he murmured, pointing to a corner mattress. "She keeps crying for her mom." Wallace and Margaret rushed to the spot. A small child, no older than 4, lay trembling under a threadbare blanket. Her face was flushed, lips cracked from dehydration. "She needs medical help right now," Wallace said, dialing Ramirez. "The others can wait for proper transport." While he made the call, Margaret gently gathered details, names, ages, how long they'd been held. The answers came in pieces. Promises of adoption that never happened. Punishments for speaking up, brought out only when important guests visited. 9 children, she whispered, her mind shifting to documentation even as horror tightened her chest. "Just like Emma said," Wallace returned, voice low. "State police tactical units on its way, 20 minutes. They'll secure everything and take over custody." He knelt by the fevered child. "Let's move her upstairs so she's ready to go." Margaret wrapped the girl in her jacket. A tug at her sleeve stopped her. The rocking girl's eyes were wide, filled with fear. "It's Friday," she whispered. "They're coming for pictures." Wallace glanced at his watch. 11:47 p.m. "Who comes on Fridays?" he asked calmly. "Important men with cameras," the girl answered, her voice nearly gone. "And Judge Thomas. He says nobody will believe us." Margaret and Wallace exchanged a grim look. The corruption was just as deep as they'd feared. "You're safe now," Margaret said, even as Wallace photographed everything. The stark rooms, the restraints, the hidden cameras. As they prepared to move the sick child, the rumble of tires above stopped them cold. Headlights swept across the basement's narrow windows. "Friday guests," Wallace muttered, hand on his weapon. "Change of plan. I'll clear the main floor, keep the kids in one room, and stay with them." He disappeared upstairs. Margaret ushered the children into the smallest room, voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "I need you all to be very brave and very quiet," she told them. "Help is coming, and this time I promise, it's real." The children clung to one another, instinctively silent. A little boy missing his front teeth looked up at her, hope shining in his eyes. "After the police come," he whispered. "Can we sit in chairs?" Margaret held him close. "Yes," she said softly. "You can sit wherever you like, for as long as you want." From above, they heard the front door creak open. Voices, then Wallace's commanding tone. Seconds later, chaos. Shouts, running, something heavy crashing to the floor. In the pediatric ward of Maple Hill Hospital, the fluorescent hum filled the air as Margaret sat beside a tiny girl hooked up to an IV. 4-year-old Mia Reynolds, missing for nearly a month, was finally stable after emergency care. Across the hall, Detective Wallace and Lieutenant Ramirez spoke in hushed tones, their faces grim. The raid had rescued 9 children, jailed 5 suspects, and shocked the town. Margaret glanced at her watch. 9:17 a.m. She hadn't slept in over a day. The haunted stares of those children clung to her mind. When asked why she never ran, 7-year-old Amber had whispered, "The police bring you back. The judge makes you stay." Wallace entered. "How's she doing?" "Physically better," Margaret replied, gently brushing Mia's hair. She didn't finish the sentence. Wallace continued. "The Attorney General is assigning a special prosecutor. With the videos and the report, we have a strong case." He paused. "There's footage. Judge Blackwell appears in several clips." Margaret's stomach turned. "And Emma?" "The Gyllenhaals say she's at a relative's cabin. Officers are on their way." He hesitated. "Bradley Gyllenhaal made bail this morning." Margaret jolted. "How?" "Richard pulled strings, found a judge he knew, claimed Catherine was to blame." A nurse approached. "Ms. Collins, you have a call." Margaret followed her out, confused. "Hello?" "You've made a serious mistake," said Richard Gyllenhaal's voice. "My brother's innocent. Your evidence was taken illegally." "We found 9 children underground," she snapped. "That's not a mistake. You were suspended, under a restraining order. No jury will hear this, but your career is over." Is that a threat? Just reality. People in this town protect their own. Margaret hung up, shaking. Wallace appeared. "Richard?" She nodded. "They're scared. Those tapes implicate the judge, even the mayor." Then shouting erupted at the entrance. Bradley Gyllenhaal, red with rage, struggled against security. "They're my foster kids. I have rights." Wallace blocked Margaret. "He won't reach you. The kids are safe." But the fact that Bradley walked free chilled her to the core. Later, outside the hospital, her phone buzzed. A message. Check the local paper. She opened the Maple Hill Chronicles. The headline hit like a slap. Teachers' vigilante justice. A local teacher and amateur investigator, Margaret Collins, was accused of fabricating evidence in the Gyllenhaal case. Sources alleged she held a grudge after facing disciplinary action and had manipulated children, including Emma, to give false statements, supposedly in collusion with Detective Wallace. As she read the article, Wallace approached quietly. "You've seen it," he said. "Richard's wife edits the paper." Margaret shut off her phone, drained. "Will this ever end?" Wallace replied gently, "You showed the truth last night. Those children are finally safe." As they headed toward the exit, Margaret's phone rang, her school district. "Ms. Collins," the superintendent said, "you're placed on indefinite suspension. Please return your keys." She hung up, her eyes meeting Wallace's. "They're trying to silence us." "Let them try," he said firmly. Outside, dark clouds loomed over Maple Hill. Rain fell as Margaret glanced at the hospital where 9 children now slept, safe, except Emma, still missing. The courthouse towered under the gray sky. Reporters swarmed outside, calling it the Maple Hill basement case. Margaret, wearing her usual navy blazer, climbed the steps, now vilified in headlines, photographers tailing her every move. Inside, she sat beside Prosecutor Vanessa Chen, preparing for the hearing that would determine if charges would be filed against the Gyllenhaals and others tied to the exploitation ring. "All rise," called the bailiff. Judge Marilyn Ocasio, brought in from out of state, entered. Margaret's eyes met the defense table, Bradley and Catherine Gyllenhaal, stoic. Richard glared from behind. Judge Ocasio's voice was firm. "We'll decide whether there's cause to pursue charges of abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and misconduct. Non-essential personnel will exit during minor testimony." Wallace leaned in. "They found Emma at a hunting cabin owned by Bradley's college roommate. She's safe now." Margaret exhaled, the weight slightly lifted. Prosecutor Chen began presenting evidence, photos of basement cells, medical records, financial links. Gasps filled the courtroom. The strongest proof was hidden video footage. Only stills were shown publicly, but the judge's expression darkened as she reviewed the private content. "The state calls Margaret Collins," Chen declared. Margaret took the stand, noting Richard's stare. She recounted her observations, her notes, and the resistance she faced. Defense lawyers interrupted often, painting her as unstable. "Ms. Collins," asked Bradley's lawyer, "didn't you violate a restraining order by entering the Gyllenhaals' home?" Judge Ocasio interjected. "That was ruled admissible under emergency circumstances. Move on. Is it true you've been warned more than once for overreacting with students?" Margaret met the question head-on. "Once. 5 years ago. I filed a report about Michael Donovan, a second grader. It was dismissed. 3 months later, he died from injuries caused by his stepfather." Her voice held firm. "I vowed never to stay silent again." The courtroom fell still. Prosecutor Chen called her next witness, a county clerk who had quietly saved copies of abuse reports that had vanished from official files. They revealed a decade of buried complaints. But the most powerful moment came from Children's Hospital, where Emma Gyllenhaal, calm and composed, spoke of the punishment chair, the basement, and strangers who filmed the children. Asked why she never spoke up, she replied, Judge Thomas said kids like us wouldn't be believed. By afternoon, Judge Ocasio gave her ruling. There is ample evidence to proceed on all charges. Bail is denied. As officers led the defendants away, Catherine wept. Bradley showed no emotion, and Richard stood, pointing at Margaret. "You've ruined us with your lies." Judge Ocasio struck her gavel. "Remove him." Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds. On the courthouse steps, Margaret stood beside Detective Wallace, watching the vans pull away. "It's happening," she said. "They'll finally be held accountable." Wallace nodded. "With the evidence we have, they're facing serious time." "And the children?" she asked. "Placed in vetted homes, far from Gyllenhaal influence. They'll get therapy and support." He hesitated. "Emma asked about you. Wanted to know if you were okay." Margaret's eyes filled. "After everything, she thought of me?" Wallace smiled. "That's children. Somehow they keep loving." As they descended the steps, a small crowd waited. Teachers from Maple Hill Elementary holding signs. "We believe Ms. Collins." Principal Rodriguez approached with an envelope. "A collection. It's not much, but we wanted to help." Someone called out, "What now?" Margaret looked around. "Now we make sure this never happens again. We listen, we speak up, and we believe the small voices." Wallace touched her arm. "There's someone who wants to see you." "Emma?" Margaret asked. He nodded. "She's looking for the teacher who believed her." A year later, Maple Hill Elementary bustled with new life. Laughter filled halls where fear had once lingered. Margaret straightened a welcome students sign and glanced at a nearby photo. 9 smiling children at the state capitol. 6 months earlier, the Maple Hill 9 had joined the governor in signing Emma's law, mandating stricter foster care oversight. Justice had been done. Bradley, Catherine, and Judge Blackwell received long sentences. Investigations expanded to other counties, exposing more abuse. Richard Gyllenhaal, though not charged, vanished after losing his license. "Ms. Collins?" a voice called. She turned. It was Principal Rodriguez, the same woman who had once stood beside her. Their special guest had arrived at last. Margaret walked to the front entrance, where Detective Wallace stood beside a slender girl with chestnut hair in a ponytail. "Emma," she said softly, opening her arms. The girl rushed in. Now 7, Emma Gyllenhaal had kept her last name as a symbol of strength. In her adoptive mother's care, a retired trauma social worker, she had blossomed. "I got your invitation," Emma said. "Mom said I could miss a day of school." "I'm so glad you did," Margaret replied, taking in her glow and poise. "The class is excited to meet you." As they walked to the classroom, Wallace asked, "How's the new role?" "The reinstatement, the back pay, the apology, they meant a lot," Margaret replied. "But joining the Child Welfare Reform Commission, that surprised me." "You deserved it," Wallace said. "You never gave up." The classroom quieted as they entered. 20 children waited, curious and alert. Margaret had already spoken to them about bravery and trusted adults. "Class, this is my friend Emma and Detective Wallace," she said. "They're here to talk about staying safe." Emma glanced at Margaret, who nodded. Then the girl stepped forward with calm confidence. "Hi," she said. "Last year, I was in a place where kids had to stand all day because the rules were wrong." She paused. Ms. Collins noticed, not just with her eyes, but her heart. A boy raised his hand. "Were you scared?" "Very," Emma said. "But Ms. Collins taught me that some secrets are too heavy to carry alone." She nodded toward Wallace. "And Detective Wallace helped me when other grown-ups wouldn't." Wallace added, "If something feels wrong, keep telling adults you trust until someone listens." After questions and a storybook about safety, Margaret watched Emma sit on the rug, lean back in a chair, simple freedoms she'd once been denied. When the visit ended, Emma stayed behind. Wallace stepped out for a call. Emma approached Margaret's desk. "I brought you something," she said, handing over a drawing of a cheerful classroom where kids smiled in bright chairs. At the top, in neat handwriting, in Ms. Collins' room, everyone gets to sit. Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. "Are you happy at home?" she whispered. Emma nodded. "Mom got me a sparkly purple chair." Then, more quietly, "What about the other kids from the basement?" "They're all safe," Margaret said. "Some write to me." Wallace returned. "Time to go, Emma. Your mom's waiting." As they walked out, Emma touched each chair gently. At the door, she turned. "Ms. Collins, remember when I said I liked standing?" Margaret nodded. "I don't anymore. Now I sit when I want, sometimes all day." Her smile was sunlight after rain. Back inside, Margaret watched her students, laughing, sitting, standing freely. On her desk, Emma's drawing caught the light. She pinned it to the board, a reminder that noticing a child could be the first step toward healing. In Maple Hill, where shadows once lingered, hope was beginning to return, thanks to a teacher who looked deeper, a detective who kept his word, and a child who found her voice. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful and unsettling story. Margaret stood up for the children when no one else would, and even when the system seemed stacked against her, she didn't back down. Now the truth is out, but the fight is far from over. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the world we live in and who we choose to protect, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. Until next time, take care and keep standing up for what's right.